On September 22, 2022, Viking family and friends gathered in Amsterdam for the naming ceremony of the Viking Polaris, sister ship to Viking's first expedition ship, the Viking Octantis. Before the festivities, Damon Stanwell-Smith, Viking's head of science and sustainability, showed me around the science lab on board. He also described how the submarines, zodiacs, survey vessel, and special operation boats serve a dual purpose, allowing guests to explore while also supporting scientific fieldwork. One example he noted was that Viking's research with the submarines, and I quote, will profoundly change our understanding of the seabed of the Antarctic, which by extension teaches us about the deep sea as well. I was eager to witness it all come together in Antarctica in just a few months. Damon, Jean.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for meeting me in the science lab here on level 1, looking out on the hangar. But as I understand it, and as excites me the most, this is the heart of the expedition.
Yes.
Tell me a little about your role in this and what happens here in the science lab.
Okay. So my name's Damon Stanwell-Smith. I'm the head of science and sustainability at Viking. And I was brought into Viking 3 years ago to establish our research program. The role I have now is working with our partners. We have Cambridge University in the UK. We have, for our ornithology, we have the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Ithaca in New York, part of Cornell, the university. We have a partnership with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. We have a partnership with the Norwegian Institute for Water Research. So they do a lot of work on oceanography, especially remote monitoring of oceanography. We have a constellation of not-for-profits as well. All of these partners have been selected to be the international experts in their field, and we work with them to deliver a research program on board.
So the research program that the scientists are conducting on board, tell me a few of the things that have happened on last year's on Octantis, on the first voyages.
The voyages that we do are very well suited to environmental monitoring.
Of course.
Because we go regularly to the same places, and so we have the opportunity of gathering regular data. Specifically, we are running a program of looking at fish population using underwater videos. This is through work from IUCN, which is the International Conservation Union, and is being facilitated through the University of Western Australia. So research is always groups of people doing things together.
So tell me an example of how guests can interact with the scientist or interact with the experiments, if that's at all possible.
So short answer is yes, they can. And so by explanation, firstly, this is not edutainment. This is not show and tell. Everything that we do, and our chief scientists on board are absolutely empowered to say that there is not a single data point that is gathered that is not relevant to a research program.
That's a very important distinction.
And that, you can't buy integrity. This is something that has to be established from the beginning. For our guests to get involved, there is both primary research undertaken. Typically that would be coming into the lab or going out on a small boat to do sampling.
And they would show them how they do the sampling, and they could...
Absolutely, and to get involved in a variety of ways. And then we also have a range of citizen science programs as well. And to make that distinction, there's primary research is when guests are participating in something led by a working scientist. Citizen science is simpler tools gathering information facilitated by our team. And we have a range of activities of citizen science as well.
I also understand your scientists are open and available
Absolutely.
For informal chats throughout
the
ship. So it's not just that they're a separate part, they're integrated in every part of the guest experience.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And the key point there is that as well as being working scientists, we naturally select for those that are good communicators of their work, and that is an important part. It's an important part of actually of all science.
Yeah.
And to the point about our guests, we have many guests that are new to science, and so raising scientific literacy is both of itself helpful. It is also, it is aligned with some of our partners' missions as well. I know specifically, for example, with NOAA, there is the Viking demographic, I mean, we call them Viking guests, they call them US taxpayers. And they are delighted that that is raising scientific literacy in a broader group, and the efforts of what the US federal government do.
I know that our guest on board from NOAA educated me last night as to the challenges they face, but also her joy at her scientist being able to have been on board and will be on board.
Yes.
Tell me one thing that happened last season, an experiment or an experience that...
Well, I'd say one thing that was truly remarkable. Diving in a submarine in Antarctica, the dive went down and we saw a giant phantom jellyfish, which is 10 meters long, 30 feet long, deep sea species, very, very rarely seen ever, come swim past the windows of the submarine. Now, in the course of the season, we had 2 other sightings, and our first scientific paper is just at the moment in review, because this is both of itself extraordinary. But it reinforced, it was beautiful symmetry. The very first day we dive, we see something that is incredibly rare, and may not be quite as rare, but you look, you find in science. And so if that was a vignette, a kind of what's to come.
An awe moment.
It was an awe moment.
Interestingly, I know very little science, but the giant phantom jellyfish was a dream of one of the scientists I worked with at Smithsonian at the Museum of Natural History, Clyde Roper. Every expedition we sent him on, it was his dream to see one, and now you tell me you've seen them. They may be more common. I know he's thrilled to know that.
Well, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's
magnificent research.
It's those moments that I think any given voyage, you never know what the guest might see. But in the principle is that remarkable things, if you look enough, you'll always see remarkable things. And in contrast, I'll give you a contrasting point, is that we measure microplastics every single day. And so we manually sample about 10 tons of water, about 10,000 litres every day.
Every day.
And that's filtered through a system called the Ferry Box, which is an automated oceanographic sampling system on board. But we were discovering very small blue fibres were being seen. These samples were also being found in plankton samples that are being taken maybe a kilometre or 2 away from the vessel using a totally different system. So we're reasonably sure that this is not artefact of our presence.
And very concerning.
And concerning. And so, if you like, one is an amazing observation of rare biology, the other one is maybe looking at a potential anthropogenic pollutant, a pollutant from people. And so both ends of the spectrum. Guests on board will have the opportunity of learning how real data are gathered that affects management decisions, and also the joy of the variety of life.
Damon, I'm clearly a novice at this, and they describe this as a working lab in the literature. Could you show me a few of the key points of what that means?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the key point about any lab space is having somewhere that you can get things wet and that you can spread out. If you don't have a lab on a vessel, you end up being on the back deck or in your cabin or in the galley or somewhere that everybody else on the vessel is not very happy about.
Not optimal conditions.
Not optimal. So in the first instance, there is space. We have seawater and freshwater coming out of the taps. And in fact, having seawater coming at that, it takes a lot more work than having pipes running seawater 59 meters or about 180 feet from the clean point on the vessel. Even that is of itself challenging. In here, again, this is all filtration so that anything that goes in these sinks is filtered out and so that we don't put anything back in. And of course, it's kept in grey water. The next element is we have a fume cupboard. When we're working with anything that gives off toxic vapours, we can work in this space. Again, it's needed for doing wet chemistry and so on in the lab and storage of chemicals. On the lab here, we have a variety of optics. So the mainstay for doing biological simple research are field scopes. We have Leica field scopes, a range of these. Some of these also have an additional screen, so for those that have more challenged eyesight can see through a big screen rather than using the optics.
Oh, how useful.
We have a microscope that's linked to screens behind us, which enables demonstrations to occur.
Sort of like a cooking class, but with a lot more depth.
I like to think of it as a bit like the chef's table to have this sort of cooking. round here, this is called a Fourier Transform Infrared Spectrometer,
Okay,
or FTIR.
and it does?
What that does is basically it uses light to work out what the material anything is made of, and it references against a reference library. So we use this for identifying microplastics, and anything you put in there, we could tell you what it is.
Oh.
We have a compound microscope, which is also for fine, for looking at much smaller things down to 1,000 magnification. From here, we're in a mezzanine looking out over here. We use the small boats, the Zodiacs, the survey vessel over here, the little orange boat here, and indeed the large special operations boats to get out and do the field side of what is done. We use the submarines for observational science. We have a very powerful camera, a 6K camera mounted on the submarines, and it's recording all the time.
Oh.
So it's not just capturing things that might look exciting, things to... And also, absence of evidence is itself interesting. So if you're somewhere and you don't see something...
Spoken as a scientist,
then you're gathering information.
True.
There is a manipulator arm on each submarine as well, which in due course will give us the ability to place experiments on the seabed or recover them or collect samples and things like that.
Oh, nice.
So, and each of the submarines has that as well.
I understand the Antarctic isn't that deep. Would this be able to go down to the seabed in the Antarctic?
So, depending on where we are, our operational procedure is to only ever dive where there is sufficient seabed, if you like.
Right.
We go down to 300 meters or 1,000 feet, which is shallow in an oceanographic sense, but is deep in terms of compared to going snorkeling or going scuba diving. So, with the exception of maybe a few remote cameras going down, this ability to systematically go diving and see what we see, ourselves and a few other vessels that are doing this,
but not
is
that
going
many.
not very many, and it will profoundly change our understanding of the seafloor of the Antarctic, which by extension teaches us about the deep sea as well.
That's amazing. I mean, this is groundbreaking, as you said.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so far from edutainment that it's hard to even describe. But as a guest, I'm mesmerized, and I know our guest will be.
Absolutely.
Damon, I haven't been down on this level. Where are we?
So we are in the midships embarkation area on deck A. So this is a 300 square meter space. And this is where our guests assemble to get onto the small boats, onto Zodiacs and the tenders indeed, when we're doing operations.
Okay, can you show me where they would
Absolutely.
actually go?
So we'll come down from either from the elevators or from stairs and assemble here. It's a nice open space for doing last adjustments, adjusting life jackets, that kind of thing. And then we have 4 shell doors to the outside, 2 on each side. So we're now heading the same direction that the guests will travel down. And this is the embarkation area. We have 2 shell doors on each side of the ship. And the design enables guests to come in of one small vessel, small boat moves forward, and then flow other guests getting on board.
Which has not been the case on the other expedition ships I've been on. It's one small door and there's a backup and there's a wait.
Yes.
So you've obviously thought
We've thought this through to be efficient.
Excellent.
And then related to this is a boot washing machine. So when it's running, it's all churning away. It has a biocide that's appropriate for making sure that all the boots and other things like climbing poles and so on are cleaned. Both from a cleanliness point of view, but most importantly, not to transfer pathogens from one location to another. The broad subject of biosecurity, which we take extremely seriously. We have what we believe is the gold standard in biosecurity on board the vessel. We're way beyond what is the minimum required. This is in anticipation of likely requirements to do that in the future. And it's one of the facets of climate change. People think of climate change as just solely about heating of the climate, of the atmosphere, but also that means that there is more transfer of pathogens, of unwanted invasive species. And so as we're in vulnerable places, this is actually part of climate change mitigation. I think it's recognizing what can go wrong, and making sure that we're absolutely as responsible as we can be. And indeed, our biosecurity does continue. There is a space, we have a decontamination area just on the deck above as well, which, again, if needed, we can clean other materials. We have an automated system where there's all vacuum system coming through the ceiling in this area, which means that we can vacuum out all the bags and the coats and so on prior to going to Antarctica. And then we also have, as we've been walking along, you may have seen these big red trolleys. We designed a specific boot, a neoprene rubber boot. We designed our own boot.
And how is it different? And I'm sure they were your specifications.
The key thing there is that they've got to be comfortable and warm and safe and good for walking around in. But also the sole was chosen to not gather small seeds and other pathogens.
Of course.
Which at the moment, the proprietary ones on the market have not had that consideration taken into mind. So part of our biosecurity is indeed designed in from the outset.
So moving along the safety controls for the whole industry.
Yeah, we'd hope so.
I think so. Thank you.